All right.
Hi, everyone. It's Michelle Strasburger,
Hi, it's Tracie Spanenberg.
and we are going to talk about the future of HR. We were just chuckling because we talked about this in one of our minute videos well before COVID, and I don't think that was on the horizon of the things that HR folks are going to be dealing with. So I'm excited to have this conversation about how we think that the current situation is going to impact the future of HR.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that was maybe right at the end of January, beginning of February. I can't remember, but I think that was the last time we saw each other in person. Maybe there was one more time
Mm-hmm.
since then, but obviously a whole lot has changed. And, I've always said for quite some time that, and I think I said this in the video, what's the future of HR look like? We have no idea. And to some extent we don't,
Right.
but I think we've learned a lot over the past 7 or 8 months, and that things that will help shape the future of work for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think from my standpoint, the value of HR has increased over the last 6 months. And I think that leadership will, I think that will continue, and as leadership will lean more on HR. And I think that the old, we talked about culture and how important it was. We talked about ping pong tables and fun things in the game room or the kitchen and snacks and things like that. And I think all of that stuff is, it's nice, nice to have, but I don't think now after this, that's going to be what people are looking for with culture. I think it's going to be having a connection. I think it's going to be a strong team, a strong leader. And I think HR needs to carry that torch.
And I'm excited for that finally to arrive, because I've been talking about that for years, because we don't have those things. So we have 45 locations that are largely pretty much warehouses, and no foosball tables, no free beer that I know about anyway. Hopefully no free beer, no, none of those cool things that you saw, that started to be real popular like 10 years ago, 12 years ago. We don't have that, but what we do have are really great leaders who help grow careers, and the opportunity to learn, and the ability to make mistakes, and have that embraced as part of the culture, and just really excellent people. Earlier this morning, we had our executive team meeting, and we talked about that. We talked about what's our brand, and what's our purpose, and it's our people, and that's our differentiator. And that sounds like a terrible cliche, but it's true. And the other thing you touched on, which I think is a longer discussion, is the role of the CHRO, the CPO, the head of HR. That
Mm-hmm.
in really good companies has been valued, I think, for some time, but I know I've been reading a lot and seeing a lot about how that's changed in companies that weren't getting on board are getting on board
Mm-hmm.
now.
Right.
I know we
Yeah,
both.
I'm excited. I'm excited about that shift for HR. But I also think that HR is going to continue to have to shift to keep up with that and keep that momentum going, because I also think that we're going to be in a space now where we can hire from wherever.
Mm-hmm.
And so people are just going to be looking for the best talent, and that might not be the HR professionals in your backyard. It might be a strong HR professional from New York. It might be, somebody with Fortune 500 experience, even though they're not in New Hampshire.
And I think that's interesting. And I know we've seen that even in our Rebels calls and talk amongst our friends, with that physical presence of HR versus, remote HR, and, what is important. And to some extent, it depends on the company and the culture and how many locations and so forth. But in some ways, it's also in how progressive is a company. And if you think of it this way, if you could hire and this could go for any department, but talking about HR, hire the best HR professional that's going to not fit the best, because we don't talk about the culture fit, but add the most, right, to your culture, who's going to enhance your culture, who's going to really bring so much to your culture that doesn't matter whether that person is sitting at home in Nebraska or in the office in Boston. And that's sort of a controversial thing. And I don't think HR has moved forward as in the same way that other departments have.
Right. But I think that cultural piece is going to be huge. I mean, I don't know how long we're going to be working remotely and what that long-term impact has on businesses' ability to flex and have people working remotely. But I think if you have a more remote team, your culture has to be even stronger, and HR has to push for that to make sure that we're staying connected with people. We talked about it in our last podcast about making sure leaders are staying connected, but I think HR also has to drive that and make sure that the organization's focused on culture and in their strategic plans.
Absolutely. And this is the time of year, I think, that a lot of companies are doing that. And I think this is the time when companies are starting to shift and go, wow, what just happened over the last 7 months? And does our strategic plan even make sense anymore? And what are we doing going forward? Because everything changed. And I look at some companies that were primarily made up of people in the office. And I look at some of those companies that forced people back or just had people come back. There's a difference between that and something like what we did, in that we actually opened it up wider and we're limited to 50% capacity in the office because we can't socially distance in the way that we can in the branches. We call our branches. I look at that and just kind of go, why? Because we know there are companies, we know companies here that did that, and just, you don't necessarily have to embrace a remote first mindset, but is that something that everybody wants? And is it the best thing for your company? Is it the best thing for your culture? And it's a really tremendous opportunity to take a look at your culture, what's working, what do you need to fix and change.
Mm-hmm. So what are you focused on with your strategic plan for people in the next few years?
Yeah, so we're starting in the next couple of weeks. So I'm really excited. So we're doing it, which is pretty cool and interesting and very, very different, but we're doing it over Zoom. So we're strategic planning instead of getting in a room for a couple of days and all sitting around a table and talking about it. We're breaking it up into a number of different sections. And I'm excited to see what comes out because I am leading one of the groups that's people focused, people and culture focused. And it's a cross departmental, cross position type of group made up of people throughout the company and not just executive leaders, right? So that's going to be really cool to see what they came up with, because our company, which is different than where I've worked in the past, but our company, our CEO Bill has said that, we'll always have a people focused goal. It is that important that there will always be a people focused component to our strategic plan. So I'm not sure where we'll end up, but it will be driven by all kinds of people, which is wonderful and much different than those of us in the executive team just sitting there and going, yep, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. It's really kind of a crowdsourced approach, which will be fun.
I love that. Is this the first time you're doing that?
Yeah, so we've always had input, and we've always had committees, and we've always had people focused things, but it was more driven kind of top down, and this is a much more collaborative approach, which is really pretty cool.
Yeah, and an easier way to get buy-in, because the people that you need to get buy-in from will be in those groups.
Right. And I talk a lot about, like, when I talk about HR tech and getting people together who are users, right? When you think of that, if you're trying to put something out, why not have the people that are going to be doing that thing or whatever it is be involved from the start? So it makes a lot of sense, and I think it'll be really fun.
Yeah, that sounds neat. I like that approach. I've had to, in the past, push to make sure that there's a people goal for some of the companies I've worked for. And I think that's so important. Even a couple of years ago with strategic planning, we were talking about the employee experience. And I think that's even more important as you think about strategic plans
Yes.
going forward, because if you're going to continue to stay remote or even bringing people back into the office, both of those situations will shift how you work and will
Yeah.
shift the experience that employees have.
We brought in, and this is, our team was really small. It's still small, but we brought in somebody internally into the role of people experience manager. And her role is going to be to go from, sorry, I lost part of my chair. So that was the noise, if you could hear it. Hopefully I don't fall over.
Don't fall.
Yeah, hopefully you may see me stand. So her role is going to be to look at things, and she does a number of other things too, but from that whole employee life cycle. So from beginning to when they leave, and then potentially even after, and a possible alumni network or some sort of thing like that. And we're learning more and more about how critical that is. And one of the things that I'm trying to tie into that, we're thinking about, and eventually we'll tie that in, is the role of the candidate experience too, because you really want to treat a candidate as well. Let me say it this way: you want to treat a candidate that you want to hire, and a candidate that you don't want to hire with the same level of respect, and you want to treat them both well. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that a lot of companies get this right. I think we have a lot of room for improvement there. And so that's going to be really tied into the employee experience. So we want that same wonderful experience from the time you think about working for the Granite Group to the time that you leave the Granite Group. So that's a long project, but that's something that we're really passionate about and going to make happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. I always tell my hiring managers that the candidate experience needs to be fantastic, regardless of whether or not we're hiring the person, because we may go reach out to them in the future.
Right.
And they're also going to be carrying that message with them. So the message we want them to carry is a very positive one. When their friends start to say, oh, I'm applying to this company and that company, and you want the response to be very positive.
And I know I see this a lot on Twitter, friends of ours that are going through job searches and their experiences in going through that aren't always positive, right? And I've heard from, definitely over the years that, and I see this with people I don't know and see this on Twitter, I've applied to 80 jobs and only one of them sent me a acknowledgement, and that was from an ATS, not a human. And so it's just, we've lost that human touch with all of these cool things that we have the ability to have with technology. We've lost a little bit of that human touch, and that's so important in the employee experience. And that can be done with technology, but we have to be really mindful of how we do that.
Right. I always am taken aback when I get an email from a candidate saying, wow, thank you for responding. I never get a response. I'm like, how do you not respond to at least to tell them you got their information?
Yeah.
Yep. So even when we're saying no, I think people appreciate that closing the loop.
And it's important, right? If you can think of it as a candidate, and just maybe this is the job that you really want and you haven't heard anything, and you're going to wonder, and just knowing that, okay, I didn't get it, but at least they let me know is so important. And it's pretty easy, but it's so often missed. And that's a whole other conversation, but that's critical.
A future podcast.
Yeah, it's a future project. I did a talk for Arizona SHRM. I did a keynote in August, and it was kind of on the future of work and technology and how that blended together. But my main message, which was rather simple, but was everything's focused on people. So I think, everything's focused on people. Technology is great, and it's going to enable you to focus on the people, but the companies that aren't leading people first have to get on board with that, or they'll be behind, or maybe won't be around. And then I think I see, and this is something we're trying to do as well, but the future of work really being almost like a curated employee experience. So we talk about that employee experience being different, but that it's different for every individual, because every individual is totally unique. So, you're not going to create thousands of different applications, but you're going to build an experience that is right for that individual person. And that's hard
Mm-hmm.
to do, but I think we'll see a lot more. And I talk a lot about this, where our approach is very individual and very personal with just about everything. It's hard, but if you think about it this way, if you take all of that kind of data entry and the paperwork that HR does, and you automate that, and you use the technology to take away that, then you can focus on the
Mm-hmm.
things that matter. And that's your people, and that's building these experiences, and coaching and developing. And, you know, your people are everything to your company. And I know our friend Kayla talks about this a lot, that, she's, eats, sleeps, breathes, and dies for her people, when she works at a
Mm-hmm.
company. And we need to get that focus back. And I think some of us have lost that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I also think that if we're going to be successful at building culture and employee experience and candidate experience, we need to also invest in leadership and leadership development. And I think
Right.
that's probably another strong area for HR to consider in the future is, do you have the right leaders in place? Are you growing them? Are you developing them? So that you're having a good candidate experience. Because we can push the candidate experience as much as we want, but if you don't have good leaders executing on that at the front lines, the experience isn't going to be consistent, and it's not going to be what we want.
Right. And that's right. And you can have all the football table or foosball tables, or ping pong tables you want, but if somebody gets in and has that wonderful experience and then has a really shitty manager, then it's not worth it. Right. So
Right.
that's a responsibility, and that's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to be a leader, but it's
Mm-hmm.
a really hard job. But they deserve training. Everyone deserves training, but we need to make sure the people that are responsible for people within our companies are getting the support that they need.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. So I'm curious to hear maybe what our listeners are thinking for the future of HR too.
Yeah.
So comment on Twitter and Facebook and all the other outlets. But I think I heard future of HR is invested in culture, the employee experience, the candidate experience, which is looped in, and leadership. I think those sound, I'm excited. I think those sound very exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. And very, 100% people first. I think 100% people first. But that's all for today. And next time we see you, we'll have a guest, and hopefully you enjoyed this episode of HR Rebooted. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye, everyone.